June 11, 2025, and we have a very, very special person here with us today, Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton, our wonderful Minister of Health and Wellness. And so I say good morning to him and the Ministry of Health team that's here, also the members of the media that are here, and Jamaicans watching at home and abroad. And as always, I start with a few good news stories. And of course, again, I start with murders being down. Murders are down 44.1%. Right before we started, I was trying to get the commissioner, but I know he has his morning meeting to find what's the latest number. But that's from June 7. Murders are down 44.1%. Every week I get a different number. It keeps going up. I am told that they are trying to get it to 50% down. That is a huge decline in murders that we are seeing in Jamaica, and it is something we have to applaud. In addition to that, from the June 7 numbers, shootings have dropped by 32.4%, and overall major crimes are down 19.2%. That is what good governance looks like. And this is because of the work, the billions of dollars that has been invested in our security forces. And every time we do a post-cabinet press briefing, I'm going to bring these numbers to you because it is very important. Just last week, Friday, we saw the JCF launch some new initiatives using artificial intelligence. They're going really far. So they've done work already in providing the kind of resources that our police officers need, and we're doing more work there. There's been investment in intelligence gathering and the use of technology. And just last week, they launched their Constable Smart, which is an AI tool that any Jamaican can use to ask any question about law enforcement generally, and it will answer you. And so they're continuing to innovate in the JCF, and they're not stopping where they are, and we're very happy about that. And as you recall, last year we invested over $500 million in modern technology for the JCF. We also included the acquisition of body-worn cameras, drones, biometric systems, and enhanced cyber investigation tools. And that's a very important one, given what we have been seeing in terms of the use of devices and just cyber crimes generally increasing. The other thing that I would like to note relates to restorative justice. And we're doing a lot of work to make Jamaica more peaceful. On one side, you have what's happening in terms of law enforcement, but on the other side, in terms of justice, there's a lot of work that's taking place. And so the Minister of Justice has spoken a lot about this, and they have sensitized over 29,000 Jamaicans about restorative justice since the start of 2024. And the Restorative Justice Unit is promoting a culture of peace and non-violent conflict resolution, which we know is absolutely important in Jamaica. And I should note that since 2016, the government of Jamaica has invested over $3.7 billion to expand alternative justice services across the island. And so these include mediation, child diversion, and victim services. And so this is something that we should applaud, because as we do law enforcement, there is other work that we have to do. In terms of other good news in the justice space, we heard the announcement that the courts are backlog free. The Court Administration Division announced that all 13 parish courts across Jamaica are now free of criminal case backlogs. That is a big, big thing in Jamaica. And as we said, we're looking at making Jamaica more peaceful. There's an entire ecosystem around that. So you have law enforcement and what's happening there. You have what's happening in terms of restorative justice and dealing with conflict resolution. And now you have, when you go into the justice system, that you can have your cases dealt with more quickly. And so all criminal matters in these 13 parish courts will now be dealt with within the established 24-month standard. And this reduction is a big deal. And I remember Minister Chuck and the Honorable Justice Brian Sykes briefing me when I first became a minister on some of the new case management systems they were introducing into the court system. And we're seeing technology again transforming the delivery of our public services. Just move on to one more. In relation to Springvale, there's a lot of work that's happening across the country. It's hard to pick because, as you know, Spark is happening. It's sparking all over the country. There's a lot of road work happening, but there's also a lot of other initiatives taking place. And one that we want to highlight is the Holland to Bounty Hall roadway in Trelawney, which was officially reopened following a $144 million rehabilitation project undertaken by the NWA to upgrade that 5.2 kilometers of roads. And it is expected to significantly enhance connectivity, safety, and travel efficiency for residents, farmers, and commuters. And so that's another big one that we see happening. In terms of water, there are many. I'll just mention one. The Lapland Water Project, and that's in St. James. And so residents in Lapland are set to benefit from a newly implemented water system under the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation's Rural Water Supply Program. And our Prime Minister and Minister Matthew Samuda also have committed to bringing water to the pipes of every community, and we're doing that step by step. And this one in Lapland is another one that we're very, very excited about. And so there's more here. As always, I don't go through everything because we don't have time, because we have our special guest today, who is just an extraordinary Minister of Health. I remember being on the other side, outside, looking in during COVID and seeing the wonderful job that he did. I cannot imagine anybody else taking Jamaica through COVID as Minister of Health in the way that you did, Minister Tufton. And so I'm very excited this morning to have you here at PostCab to talk about all that's happening in the health sector, a health sector that has been left to languish for a long time. But he's doing a lot. And this morning, please join me in welcoming our Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honorable Christopher Tufton.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. And your very kind words have given me my vitamins for the morning. Thank you all for being here and for listening. Sorry, I'm trying to get my documents in. Okay, great. All right, so yesterday we delivered, myself, of course, supported by the team in health, delivered our sectoral presentation. A number of issues were discussed. We addressed issues around the state of public health, the work that is being done, the achievements of the government over the past 9 years, and I deliberately tried to contextualize the discussion by using a base year for comparison, given that we are in the season for comparisons, for ideas, and hopefully in the not too distant future, in keeping with our democratic cycle for decision making. So we try to outline the achievements of the Andrew Holness administration, and there's a lot. We made the point that the government of the day has committed significant resources to public health. Despite the challenges that we've had to deal with, in health there's almost a crisis around every corner. And I listed some of those crises which you're very aware of: the tail end of the chickpea virus, the Zika virus, 1 year of a dengue outbreak, of course COVID for nearly 3 years, then the post-COVID challenges that we've had to face, the collapse of the Cornwall Regional Hospital. Despite all of that and the management of that, which involved the full team and to a large extent cooperation from the people of Jamaica, we have also been able to develop and build out or begin building out a strategic plan. So we tabled a 10-year strategic plan in 2018, and that strategic plan has been the guiding principle while dealing with the crises of the day in terms of building out resilience in the health system. And what does that resilience look like? The features of that resilience is what I try to outline. For starters, it means greater expenditure in infrastructure. So we have spent quite a bit of money expanding health centers, and I outlined over the last 5 years we have spent about 3.88 billion Jamaican dollars. Secondly, we have spent, and that involves every parish across Jamaica. In fact, 138 of the 320 health centers, representing, of course, the primary base for primary health care, so these are the community health facilities, have benefited from some form of upgrade. Under a range of programs, the most ambitious being the Health System Strengthening Program, which is financed by the IDB, the EU, and the Government of Jamaica. And these are substantial improvements in some instances. In other instances, not as big expenditure, but it has certainly improved the environment within these health centers. So things like adding air conditioning in waiting areas, cleaning up and expanding the doctors' rooms for examination, making sure bathrooms work, toilets flush, water is running, putting in spare catchment systems, things that restore, from our perspective, the credibility of the community health centers, which has benefited, which has made an impact in the community, as reflected in the fact that more persons are actually going to community health centers rather than going to hospitals and into the accident and emergency wards where we have had a tradition of overcrowding. So a lot in primary, a lot in secondary. Cornwall tends to be the topical issue because of the circumstances surrounding the collapse and the subsequent efforts that have had to be made after. But we have had equally ambitious programs for a number of other hospitals. If you go to Spanish Town now, I don't think one can recall in recent times when you have two large cranes set up at the compound of Spanish Town Hospital, which is building out a 6-story building, which will mean 5 new operating theaters, 125 new beds, twice the size of the A&E, and I could go on and on. The same, of course, for Western Child and Adolescent, which is a new facility. And to come will be St. Anne's Bay, Maypen, and we have also done a lot of work at Chapelton Community Hospital, Lionel Town, and are working on a few others. Alexandria, where we spent over $400 million to restore Alexandria in the hills of St. Anne. So we outlined the infrastructure work, which is a renewal, in a sense, of healthcare infrastructure. The other is the HR. And through compensation review, and even before that, we have sought through an HR plan to realign the requirements of community health and secondary health by applying, with the permission and support of Cabinet and the Ministry of Finance, more posts for a number of new positions to allow for permanent placements of persons. Previous to this time, a number of persons were working in the system, but they were working temporary. In other words, they were working on contract, which did not offer job security for those staff members and, in a sense, contributed to persons exercising their options to go elsewhere. What we have done as a government is to provide permanent posts. It's about 1,500 or so for doctors, for nurses, and about 1,200 for doctors across the range, both specialized and generalists. So we have aligned the HR program with the infrastructure build-out and have assigned more doctors in primary health care, which again contributes to more people going to the health centers as opposed to hospitals. I outlined also that we do have a problem with staffing because we have shortages in some of the critical areas. And that's something that we are working on, which is why we offer the Barwin Scholarship to try and get more Jamaicans trained in these areas. And we announced the second phase of the Barwin Scholarship, which will be advertised, if not today, tomorrow. Is it in the papers today, Pitre? Is it advertised today? Barwin. Sunday. And that will be another 500 million for a range of posts. We have outlined the areas of focus because it's a development scholarship, and so we're trying to fill scarce areas. Now, the investment in scholarships means persons have to come back and give time in public health, and that's the quid pro quo, if you will, of the investment to try and fill some of those posts. So we have aligned and are developing a strategy as it relates to the HR component. And in terms of the infrastructure, the equipment, diagnostics, I outlined how the government over the last number of years have invested in new equipment. I did a comparison with 2015, and it's clear that we have more diagnostic equipment in the system today than we had in 2015, just prior to our assuming office. And indeed, I believe that perhaps more than any time before. It's important to note that it's not enough. And we still have challenges, which is why we have the outsourcing arrangements. However, it is progress, and based on the pending leasing arrangement, which is to come, it's going through the procurement process as we speak, then I think we are going to be in even a better position based on what is to come. So, in summary, I think that as a government, we have done very well. In a comparison situation, I think we have certainly done better than those before us, but I made the point that we still have some ways to go. I don't want the impression to be created that somehow things are perfect, because that would defy the realities on the ground. There are still people who have to wait in some instances. There are still customer service issues that we have to work on as part of our change management strategy. And there are still some services that we have to build out in order to more adequately serve the population. The other point of distinction, I think, which is the government should be recognized for, is the expanded role of the National Health Fund. Prior to 2016, NHF was issuing some less than 1 million prescriptions a year. Today, last year, the NHF issued some 3 million prescriptions to Jamaicans. We have moved from 16 to 24 categories of illness. In other words, we have added 3 other areas of cancer-related illnesses, as well as other areas that is now covered under the NHF. And what that means is that more Jamaicans are benefiting from the National Health Fund. And it therefore also means that there is more relief for those Jamaicans. So today the NHF provides coverage for 5 cancers: lung cancer, colorectal cancer, multiple myeloma, in addition to breast and prostate cancer, which we inherited when we came into office. But in addition to that, the NHF also now covers conditions related to hyperactive disorder, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, lupus, Parkinson's disease, and thyroid disease. And so we made a point that the NHF has become a lot more relevant to the needs of the population. And that's what we're about. It's about serving people where they need the service. It also demonstrates the commitment of the government to realign and to adjust and to ensure that we meet the requirements of the Jamaican people. So having done that kind of update, we then proceeded to look at what does the future hold? Because leadership really requires us not just to reflect on the past, recognize the future, the present, and what is being done, but also to look at the future. And I made a point that if you were to look at the projections of the population in terms of growth, in terms of birth rate, in terms of migration, in terms of the aging population. We are embarking on a process that will see more Jamaicans in the category of the older population over time, and their demands are somewhat different from a different generation, from a younger generation. And we have to respond to this. Now, primary healthcare reform is a big part of that because the older population will normally require more attention in their surroundings, in their communities. And one of the reasons for the build-out is to keep people in their communities, but with the expansion of community health aides, which we have increased by over 1,000 since this government has taken office, so we now have about 2,000 community health aides, we will also have to use the primary healthcare facilities to go out to people, to visit in their homes. Many Jamaicans might not know unless they are impacted, but we have community health aides who actually visit senior citizens, not just visit, not just check on their medication, not just do their vitals. They wash their plates, they sweep out the house, they sit down and read to them, they even comb their hair. And these are healthcare workers. So in a sense, they are almost like family. They're a support team, a support staff. And we will have to see and do more of that going into the future. So we are preparing the process and preparing the system to make that work. And so we are building out, as I announced yesterday, the Health Program for Older Persons Plan. And I outlined the objectives of this to maximize the period in which older persons maintain good health, wellness, and functional independence through the promotion of healthy aging throughout the life course. To build the capacity of at least 90% of healthcare practitioners in primary healthcare to identify and manage healthcare needs in older adults, to provide allied health and rehabilitative services to older persons with complex health and disability needs, and I could go on. And this program is a program that has started, and we are further developing that. I made a point, too, that we have to also identify special needs as part of holistic health, and made the point around our women and the need to give them support. Perimenopausal and menopause are conditions that are natural, it evolves, and therefore it's not an illness, but it does impact quality of life. And in the past, the public health system has been not as sensitive to those conditions because they are not trained or conditioned or not programmed to respond to those types of discomfort or the impact they have on our women. And as part of the future, we intend to integrate as part of the holistic response to treat with those particular circumstances. And the same for older men, and the fact that they will also, over time, as they age, be impacted by the conditions of aging. And this is going to be important for us to be able to respond. So we said a lot on that, and more will be said in terms of that policy over time. The other point we raised, which I think is important, is the point on artificial intelligence. So we tabled a document in the Parliament, which is a concept paper for Jamaica, which outlines the role, as we see it anyway, or the approach to developing a strategy around artificial intelligence in health. And we announced a committee that is chaired, I have the members here. I didn't have a chance to read who are the members of the committee because the time in the Parliament was a little limited. I think I have them here. We announced a committee chaired by Professor Ruben Pillay, University of Alabama, who is a healthcare innovation and artificial intelligence specialist. Dr. Stephen Johnson, who is at the University of the West Indies. He'll be vice chair. He's a consultant working out of my office. Professor Lloyd Waller, digital transformational governance and political communication at UWI. Professor Mansingh, who is head of the AI unit at the university. Professor Chad Rich at the University of Miami, medicine, urologist, oncology, and clinical innovation. Dr. Bruce, who is chief of staff at the University Hospital of the West Indies. Dr. Sexas, University of Miami School, informatics, health data science, population health, and digital health. Dr. Diane Campbell-Stennett, an epidemiology and biostatistician, health informatics. She's the regional technical director of the Western region. Ms. Kadian Birch, who is health policy system strengthening out of the Ministry of Health Central Office, and Mr. Rowan Smith, who is a data analytics, cloud computing, security management, data protection member of the Southern region. There may be one or two others that we add to this committee. And the objective of this group is to use the next 12 months to look at the strategic plan that we have and align with that strategic plan what the options are for the use of artificial intelligence in achieving the objectives that we want to achieve, recognizing the demographic transition, among other things, that is taking place. So simply put, screening. We're spending a lot more time on screening as part of prevention. Currently, our Know Your Numbers will provide screening in communities where persons go from one station to the next, check their biomass index, their blood pressure, blood sugar, and so on. There are actually machines now that you walk through a tube and it gives you a full screening. There are screening technologies that allows you to screen and give some level of predictability of what the possibilities are in terms of your health profile into the future. It is that complicated and significant. The other example that hopefully may drive the point home is the issue of aging, or older population, and where they live. I mean, times are changing. No matter your age, most people want to live on their own. And they don't want their children around them. Children may prefer to be on their own, but still want to monitor their parents. There are technologies now that allows for the kind of monitoring that is necessary to allow for real-time intervention and response. These are just simple cases. I'm sure it can get a lot more complicated. I've seen technology elsewhere outside of Jamaica that does brain surgery without touching the patient. And it's high science. I won't pretend to understand all of it, which is why we have appointed this committee. But it is the future. And the point I'm trying to make is that this government doesn't just think about the present. This government is thinking ahead and preparing the population in terms of our health infrastructure and people to give the Jamaican people the best possible opportunities for life, long life, and quality of life. And that's what it is the intention of this committee is. So the AI, which we have coined a phrase, artificial intelligence technology enhanced care for health, or AI tech for short. We look forward to that 12-month work, at which point I hope to bring the teams together somewhere in Jamaica, bring stakeholders representing different interests, have a conversation over a day or two, and come out with a set of potential policy implications which will be subject to cabinet scrutiny and hopefully approval that will lead hopefully to a more resilient health system. We have done the same, by the way, for the older population, but in a different way. I've appointed the Honorable Denise Eldemeyer Shearer to head up a team that will look at some of the implication around aging and what needs to happen in the future. And she's an expert on that, so we anticipate some work from her. We've also looked at how do we advance in terms of addressing the leading causes of death. So there are if you look at the profile, we lose about 18 to 22,000 deaths each year, Jamaicans. And if you look at the leading causes, the top four, which are related to cardiovascular disease, cancers, diabetes, I think there's one other. But the top four captures about 40% or so. And we have a NCD, which is all lifestyle related, by the way, non-communicable diseases. We have a commission headed by Professor Trevor Ferguson, that looks at these issues and provides advice in terms of how to advance our efforts against lifestyle-related diseases. But I think there's a need to streamline in the future to identify the top ones and to develop centers of excellence, which means what are the best policy practices, map the sort of trajectory of these diseases to determine how we intervene at what point, both from a prevention standpoint as well as from a curative standpoint, and how do we continuously stay ahead of the curve in terms of research and techniques to control, to manage, and hopefully to cauterize these conditions. And so that's also one of the futuristic approaches that we have announced and will pursue over time. There are other issues quickly, Madam Chair, before I stop, that I think appears not so significant but are very significant. One of them is the issue of the food handlers' permits. So there are about 300,000 Jamaicans who apply for a food handler's permit each year. That's a fairly significant number. It's managed through the Environmental Health Unit, and across the country, persons go to a particular location to pay, and then they are subjected to a course, and then they are awarded a permit. The challenge is people wait quite long, and sometimes half the year for a 12-month permit is spent trying to qualify for the permit. It's highly inefficient, and it's quite frustrating to entrepreneurs, many of whom are small business operators, the bar owners, the jerk stand man, or larger players. So if you have a company like I don't want to call any names, company that supplies the entire country, everyone in that facility have to have a food handler's permit once they're operating in and around the production of that food item. And it can take a while. So we have been discussing how do we adjust policy to accommodate and facilitate businesses by making it an easier process. And the Prime Minister did challenge us in each ministry to try to find ways to deal with the bureaucracy, which we have been looking at in health. And so we have come up with a set of adjustments which will be worked on over the next months, which starts with the renewal that will last for 2 years as opposed to 1. So once you get it, you have 2 years as opposed to 1 year. Introduce a bill payment arrangement, which doesn't allow you or require you to go to one location, traveling long distances in some cases. Go to any bill payment store, a simple fix, or to your bank, online payment, which seems to be simple enough and should have been thought about long ago. For whatever reason it wasn't, but there's no time like present, and we're moving towards that. Implement a bimodal modular training format to reduce certification processing time for 3 weeks to 2 weeks. Introduce new technology to facilitate faster and more efficient processing to eliminate delays and backlogs. Cadre of professionally trained food handlers, so we're going to increase the staff, and the application process points, reducing wait time and enhancing delivery. So we are going to change the way persons apply for and the length of time for food handlers permits, which I think is very, very important. I spoke also about the processing of applications for drugs, both for local manufacturers as well as for distributors who import drugs into the island. It's a long process. Part of it is because it's primarily paper-based, and A lot of times applications miss the items and it has to wait a long time for return correspondence and back and forth. It's just bureaucratic. So what we have done, we have partnerships which we are going to leverage to ensure that approvals, which are subject to the standards and quality that protects our local population, so it's very important, will depend more, not exclusively, but more on what we term a reliance system, where if the drug is approved by the US Standards Agency, the UK, or the European Union, it will offer a faster response based on the additional work that we may need to do, but with some greater reliance on that system. We have also said that we will place online the application process, and if persons are not submitting the dossier in its complete form, the applications will be rejected, which immediately provides a response. And we will also give priority to local manufacturers who are manufacturing for export or otherwise. And that is because it's local jobs, local production, and we should support that. And then the final one that I would like to mention is the operating theaters, which is a source of challenge based on long waits for surgeries. We have 73 operating theaters across the country, 17 at the University Hospital of the West Indies. We intend to add another 27 new operating theaters, which will increase the capacity by some 38%. And we are already doing that. Cornwall Regional will have 11. Spanish Town will have 5. They now have 2. Western Child and Adolescent, which we hope to open this year, will have 4. And then there are a number of others where we are adding one or establishing one. So Linstead, for example, which doesn't have any, we'll add one. Chest Hospital, which has 1, we'll add another to make it 2. And I could go on and on. That, we hope, will enhance the ability to respond to the demands, both from emergencies. We normally don't delay emergencies for obvious reasons. What tends to get delayed are the electives, so the person doing a hernia surgery or things that can wait. They tend to get pushed back because in a high trauma society, those trauma cases or emergency cases tend to come in very, very frequently. We've also tried to reset the approach to maintenance of our operating theaters, and I've instructed the regions to have an operating theater manager for each. Some hospitals do, some don't, and to revise the policy around schedule maintenance, which is necessary. You know, it's interesting, an operating theater is where most, should I say, viruses or germs or potential health risk threats are exposed, because that's where you go to get cure. And by extension, it's a very sensitive environment. So issues like airflow and air quality and so on are very important. If the air conditioning is off by a bit, it can create contamination on the walls, and if deep cleaning doesn't happen often enough and so on, it can be a problem. So I've mandated that we have these managers, that we have a backup ventilation system. Some do, some don't. And that is a problem because ventilation tends to be a major source of downtime. And also that we establish a new paradigm of relationships with our suppliers so that they demonstrate their capacity for quick turnaround. You know, you can't have an essential service where you have to wait 3 months for a part because it has to be manufactured. It really is not. Then the service no longer is essential. And so we have asked for a review of that policy. There are other things, but I think maybe I should stop here and hand over now to Madam Chair for any other comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. That was really, really good. The presentation yesterday was excellent, and there's a lot more that we heard about this morning or got further context in. And so, again, I thank you, and I say you're an excellent Minister of Health, and I think you will go down in history as one of the best we've had. We're going to open up for questions, and I have to note, as a woman who is now 45 years old, the announcements around perimenopause and menopause were very welcomed, Minister, and I'm very, very happy that we are taking these conditions seriously, seriously enough that it appears in your sectoral presentation. There are a lot of women who are quietly going through these changes, and they are real. And for you to acknowledge it, I know a lot of women are extremely happy that you said it. And so we look forward to hearing what's going to happen for us peri and menopausal women. Over to you. It's good to see you, Naomi.
Good morning, Minister.
You look beautiful.
Oh, goodness, you're too kind. Thank you so much, Minister. And yes, I absolutely concur. There are so many women who are...
Sorry, not hearing you.
Again, wonderful. All right, we're hearing now.
Yes.
Perfect, good. No, thank you so much, Minister. And yes, Minister, there are so many women who are suffering in silence. So excellent move by the government of Jamaica to have put perimenopause as part of that. All right, so we have three the hard way this morning for those who are returning in terms of our media representatives here.
Yay.
And so we're going to start, depending on who's saying it. All right, fantastic. Let me start with Zara then. All right.
Morning, everybody. I'm Zara Burton with 18 Degrees North. Good morning, ministers. I would like to start by asking two questions on behalf of 18 Degrees North and then one question on behalf of Reuters. Reuters is asking Minister Tufton, the meeting with Rubio when he came to Jamaica, I noticed you were part of the pictures. Was there any indication from the United States in that meeting regarding China's influence in Jamaica, in any sector, but particularly maritime, to try to reduce Chinese influence in Jamaica? So that was question one, and from Reuters. Two questions from 18 Degrees North.
No. I think we may take all of them, and then we can respond. So you can go through all three.
Okay,
Yeah.
Two more from me. The diagnostic equipment that you mentioned, more of that has been in the health sector now than under previous administrations. Medical Technologies, from my research, has been one of those providers of equipment. Donovan Williams, the MP, has said he is a trustee shareholder of this firm. Have you satisfied yourself who the major shareholder is behind this firm? In other words, who the government continues to do business with at the Ministry of Health? If you have not, and if it's still murky, can you say if you sanction the continuation of contracts being given to Medical Technologies, given that the beneficial owner form, from my research at least as of this week, has still not been filed at the company's office to see who is behind this company? And if you know who is behind it, can you say who is the major shareholder behind it at this point?
First of all, the issue with China and the US, I have no knowledge of that. I was part of at least one meeting, but there are several others. But I have no information on whether or not any issue was raised as it relates to the relationship between Jamaica and China. I don't know if Madam Information Minister can comment on that.
I'll respond on that question in relation to the Rubio meetings that we had, which were very good meetings. A lot of things were discussed. We did speak about the maritime industry. We spoke mainly about Kingston as a transshipment point. And we spoke we had some good conversations about Jamaica being a nearshoring destination. The assets that we have in Jamaica, especially in terms of our deep harbor and the wonderful developments that have been taking place at our port. And we also spoke about a relationship where we would get training from Americans who have expertise in that area. So we did talk about transshipment, but I do not recall at any point China coming up in the conversation. So what we were discussing was how Jamaica could position itself, especially as a nearshore destination for the U.S. And we've had follow-up conversations on how to take this forward. We will do some collaboration with our maritime university, which is the Caribbean Maritime University that we have here. We're actually still exploring with the U.S. Embassy team what that kind of collaboration would look like. But that was the extent of the conversations and where we are with the discussions to date. Sure.
The issue of the medical technologies. First of all, I don't see it as my role as minister to investigate shareholders. There are agencies that do that, oversight bodies, the Auditor General, the Integrity Commission, and anybody else who wants so to do. My role is to ensure that a process was followed in the procurement, under the procurement rules. I have appointed a board, and that board is, in this instance, is the Southeast Regional Health Authority Board, and they presided over a process. And when the issue became a controversial one, I asked for a report on the process. And the report I had was that the process was followed. There was a terms of reference developed. It involved persons in the field, 2 neurosurgeons in this case. The advertising was done, firms bidded, an evaluation was done, an award was made, and it went to PPC. That's primarily my responsibility. And unless some other information is brought to me by a credible source, I don't have time to go and dig up at the company's office, as you are, or anybody else, to determine who is behind a company. In addition to that, the matter as I find it now is before the courts, and I believe that the courts hopefully will, which is another layer of interrogation, if you will, which everybody has a right so to do, both to defend their reputation as well as to protect their interests. Then I believe that the parties who are involved in that process, we should allow it to play out and let the chips fall where they may.
Thank you, Ministers. Now we'll go to Jamila.
Morning, I'm Jamila from TVJ News. Just to follow up on Zara's question, Minister, medical technologies revealed that they were not paid as yet, based on the press release that they sent out sometime in May. May I ask, what is the reason why? Is it because of the court case, or if you have any further information, you can just say. Also, I noticed that the table that you presented in Parliament yesterday with specialized nurses, it seemed to be very concerning because some of the specialties had zero take-up. You're talking about less than 2%, and I think the highest was like 55% for critical care nurses. To what extent is the ministry looking at further incentivizing some of these areas to ensure that you have full take-up? And I'm going to put a third question in, if I may, Naomi. Thank you. So the ministry talked about revising the visitation policies at hospitals, and especially for children, that is. You know, what consideration is being given to persons who are disabled or have special needs as well?
Mm-hmm. All right, so forgive me, I'm recovering, so my voice is a little cracky. Is that what you call it?
You're fine.
It's not unusual for suppliers to the health system to be outstanding in terms of payment.
Unfortunately.
It's not something we're proud of, but it happens. So I have not checked specifically to your question whether that is a cause. I doubt it very much. I think it's the way the process works. And for one reason or another, persons are paid over time. I could check, but I don't think so. I don't think so at all. The second question about the shortages. You're referring to the table that was in this presentation. It's a serious problem. And we have said it. We need an HR plan that's going to do a couple of things, which we are doing as a government. One is to incentivize more training. One is to hire local and to retain them, because a big part of our problem is the migration, the movement, one-way movement of our specialist nurses because of economic reasons, the attractive offers they get in the US and so on. And we lose about 500 per year, I'm told. So what have we done to do that? When we assess the reason for migration, to some extent it's influenced by security of tenure. We had too many contracts. People think about retirement and what the benefits will be after they retire. Previous to compensation review, probably half of them were on contracts, so no entitlements after. The other is compensation, and the third is normally housing. And there are others, but that was my initial analysis of the situation. This is like 6 years ago. Compensation review would have, to my mind, addressed a lot of the compensation issues because there was a fairly decent increase. And also the posts that were established. As I said earlier, 1,500 nurses, about 1,200 doctors. The housing part of it is still in the air. And you may recall that the Prime Minister had announced some partnerships with the NHD to look at housing at hospitals and for healthcare workers. A lot of the new build-outs that we're doing, like at Western Child, actually has accommodation for staff. So we're trying to address that component, hopefully to deal with some of the retention. Plus working conditions, of course. So a lot of the upgrades, you know, in the health centers, sorry to be long-winded, but it's interesting. In the operation refresh that's taking place now with our health centers, I insist on a couple of things. A kitchenette for the staff, a microwave, a refrigerator, a stove, which on the face of it you'd think is very basic, but a lot of them didn't have that. Air conditioning for waiting area, bathrooms, running water, a water catchment system, a generator. I said, if you put all of that in and just paint up the place, it's a brand new facility you have, even though it's an old facility. In all of those health centers, attendance goes up by between 10 and 20% after you have refreshed it. So it's a big play. So the basic working conditions are very important. Now, outside of that, it's the training, which is what Barwint is about, which is why we offered scholarships. 536 took up the offer, 600 were offered, and they are now training, and the list is in the book. And we're offering again this year. And hopefully we'll bond those persons to remain in the system, so it's developmental. And then the third one, which is not so popular but is going to be necessary, is to accommodate where we have gaps, just as we do with the Cuban program. And so that's why I went to the Philippines and India to look at those possibilities. Ideally, it could mean some remote support. In some instances, it may mean some presence on the ground. We're going to have to come to terms with a reality that with aging population, a lower than replacement birth rate, 1.9% as opposed to 2.2, migration, your population, if not controlled or encouraged, as Russia is doing it by cutting off electricity at 10 o'clock, they say. You saw that, I don't know if you saw that article, or more, you know, whatever. If we don't manage that process, then we are going to face with a situation where unless we open ourselves up to inward migration, if you can use that term, then you're going to have major shortages. And in the health space, there's a big challenge. The final one you asked was about the visitation. So I went to the Philippines and I saw and was very impressed. The CMO before me, and she mentioned it, and I went and looked at it in particular. They have a visitation policy that allows a relative to literally assume a role of a nursing assistant, informal. There's a protocol that requires you to be, that you can only be there if you follow that protocol. But you do actually some of the duties that the nurse would do. Maybe feeding, it may be cleaning up, it may be basic stuff, but very therapeutic. Take some of the pressure off the nurses, right? And at the same time brings a lot of comfort to the sick and to the relative who wants to know how their loved one is doing. So everybody wins. And, you know, we have agreed that we have to revise that the policy. Now, you may recall last year there was a petition out of Bustamante Hospital for Children online where some 20,000 persons signed up asking for the visitation policy to be changed because of the restrictions on visiting their youngsters. It's very emotional in terms of the younger ones, but it spans across. So the idea is to change the policy, but there are some things we have to do because in cases where we're overcrowded, it becomes difficult to add another person. If they are there, what's the sanitary convenience is going to be like? So we have to ensure they have a bathroom that they need to use it. So there are some things we have to put in place and some protocols around that, which is why we're phasing it in. It will mean, by phasing it in, applying it to all concerned. You ask about disabilities. I guess it may depend on the situation, but the policy, I think, should account for anyone who can provide that support, which clearly would involve any member of the population. But I'll make note of it and I'll mention it to the CMO so that be looked at.
Minister, thanks for your comprehensive response. There are a couple of questions online, so I'm just going to do one or two as we go to Mahiri as well. You mentioned about social services from the health services going into communities and helping especially the aged. Someone wanted an update on the number of people who are just left in the healthcare system by relatives and just not picked back up.
Right. So we have about, at any point in time, between 5 and 10% of our beds occupied by social cases. We have social workers who have case files on these persons, and we attempt a lot of times to reunite them with their families. Sometimes it works, more often than not it doesn't. It's a particular profile though. It tends to be patients who are either having mental health issues, and they are therefore shunned by their family members and the community, or persons who have a chronic illness like stroke, and so they have the family, the home has a difficulty. They are intimidated in managing those cases. They have to turn them, they have to, that kind of thing. So those persons tend to be left, or just indigent, you know, aging and retired and so on. So rightfully, the social cases belong in an infirmary. That's local government. And I've worked with Minister Mackenzie in a number of cases to try and move some of those out. We had a big move some months back with the mayor and local government, Mayor of Spanish Town, Mayor Scott, expanded an area which we played a role in. And some water, please. Expanded an area and also and moved out a number of persons over to the infirmary in Spanish Town. We did the same in 1 or 2 other parishes. Part of the challenge is that as soon as you do it, more people come in. And in some instances, people literally drop their loved ones at the door. The Public Health Act does not allow you to put people in the streets. So once they're in, no matter if you discharge them. It's illegal to put them out. We had explored the possibility of taking some form of legal action, thank you, some form of legal action against family members in some cases who occupy the residence of these persons. In fact, one of the, again, long-winded, but one of the manifestation of exploitation is that when these people die, someone turns up for their death certificate to transfer their properties. So these people have homes in many cases. So they want the inheritance, but they're not willing to look after them. And the question is, if they occupy these places, because we have the file, the social case, so they do investigation to see where this person is from, who they're related to, that sort of thing. Can we pursue them in court to take care of their loved one? I am told, I think we were told by the AG that it's not possible unless we make some adjustments in law, and that's something that we need to pursue. So it's a real problem. We try as best to work with local government and the infirmaries and to reunite them. But I think over time we may have to be stronger in terms of the position that we take.
All right. Thank you, Minister. As you take a quick sip, let's go to Mahiri, and here's a few questions.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
Mahir
morning.
Stewart, Nationwide News here. Question to Minister Morris Dixon. There was a Gleaner report recently that stated that 70% of students at Pembroke Hall High School, the grade 7 or first form students, that is, are either unable to read or can only do so at a third grade level. Now, is this news to the ministry? And if not, how long has the ministry been aware of this situation?
Okay, all right, that's the first one. Okay, all right. I saw that report on Pembroke Hall High School, and it's always sad when you see those reports. And it is the reason why we are focused on literacy. And you would have heard me announce that come September, from grade 1 to grade 3, we are timetabling reading. It had been taken off of the timetable some time ago, and we are putting it back on the timetable because we cannot afford for our children to leave primary school not literate. So that's our policy position. Now, we have instances like this where students are entering into high school that are not literate. And that's why we've put in some new programs. We call it the tactical approach, where we're focused on literacy in those schools that are challenged. And so our reading specialists are working with them. We're doing more interventions. And come September, for all of those schools, because we've identified the schools that have the issues, all of those schools, the children will now get breakfast, because we realize also that for those schools where we're having the challenges, the students tend to come from challenging circumstances. And so we have to be intervening on multiple fronts in order to address it. And so it's happening there, it's happening in other schools, but I'm happy that, at least in this instant, I can say that the ministry is already working with the schools to ensure that we do something about this literacy problem. And it is really a problem that we have to address in Jamaica, and that's been our goal, and it's been articulated. No child should leave primary school that's not literate.
Yes, Minister, but in case of the fact that we already have evaluation exercises such as grade 3 diagnostic or grade 4 literacy and numeracy, and PEP itself, if it is that you use these tests to detect whether or not a child is literate or numerate, if it is possible for a student to go through the grade 3 diagnostic, the grade 4 literacy, and PEP and make it to high school still not being able to read or at a third grade level, wouldn't it detect, or wouldn't this be a way of detecting that there are gaps in the education system that the ministry has failed to plug up?
I think there are gaps, and I think it's clear that there are gaps, because you do the grade 3 test, and that tells you what's happening in terms of numeracy. And I've been to many schools, and there's some schools that will show you this was the result at grade 3, and this is the plan that we have put in place, and this is how we're seeing it change from year on year. And they'll tell you that they've been working with the ministry, they've been putting in intervention programs, and they're seeing success. And so we have some schools where you have leadership that is spending a lot of time on the tests, and that's going through it and doing interventions. We even had a new one, which we started last year, which was for every student at grade 5 that was seen as underperforming at the level. We did diagnostic tests for 2,000 of them last summer, and this summer we're going to do it. So all of them that we find that are underperforming will now get a diagnostic test over the summer holiday. And so there are more interventions like that that we need to do, but we also have to work with the school leadership, because we do have a board, we have a principal in all of these schools, and it's very important that we showcase the schools where they have a problem at grade 3, and you see by grade 6 it has been addressed. And what that means to me is that it can be done, and with the right leadership and with them taking the tools we have in the ministry, that we can definitely, within another 3 or 4 years, we can eliminate this problem. But it takes the board to be proactive. A board has to be proactive. And remember, all these children at Pembroke Hall High are coming from primary schools. And so the primary schools have to take that ownership too and work with us in the ministry in addressing this.
And last question on this topic. I believe it's something you spoke about before. There are cases where there are students that may have undiagnosed issues
Yes.
such as dyslexia.
Yeah.
And when you see a headline like this, I think the stigma would be that these children are quote unquote not bright, when that's not necessarily the
Exactly.
case. But in terms of making sure that students who may have learning difficulties or disabilities in that case are diagnosed, and you can say, all right, this person has dyslexia or ADHD or something that's preventing them from being literate or numerate. What is the ministry doing to ensure that these children are properly diagnosed?
All right, good. And we're starting a little bit earlier than the grade 3 test. And we are training our teachers to be able to pick up issues. And what we say to them is that when you pick up any challenges, you need to encourage the parent to come into the ministry, to come in and get a diagnostic test. Obviously, that's one area that we have to improve on, because there's a long waiting list for the diagnostic tests, especially at the facilities we currently have. And that's why we're building a new facility, which will be open this year, in order to do more diagnostic tests. Because I don't know if any of you have ever done a diagnostic test for a child. It is very involving. So you get the papers, and you have to fill it out as parent. You have to take it to the school, and the teacher has to fill out a portion of it. Then the child has to go and get assessed, sometimes over several days, and then an entire report has to be written up. So it's not a 1 hour assessment that's done. It's actually a very, very involved process. And what we have to do is to have more of those individuals who are trained in that area. And we have a limited supply here. Just like Minister spoke about his Barry Wint scholarship, what we're doing is providing scholarships for individuals who want to train in that area. The Ministry of Education has scholarships. We've also said to UE, you need to work with us in terms of delivering more people who can do the diagnostic tests, but also we need clinicians who can actually work with the children when it's diagnosed. Because if you have ADHD or you have other learning challenges, you need someone to work with you. Or speech deficiencies. We know there are probably 2 or 3 who you can make an appointment with. It's very hard to get an appointment with a speech therapist for a child. And so we have to have more of those, and we're putting our money there. We're putting in scholarships so that we can address that, because invariably, and I can see it sometimes when I walk in a classroom, I can see that there are those 2 children that are sitting over there with their eyes glossed over because they're not receiving what's happening in the class, and they have undiagnosed learning challenges. And so I take the opportunity, and I'm being long-winded like Minister, following in your footsteps, in encouraging parents to take their children to get assessed. Because the teachers have said sometimes the parents don't want to acknowledge that there may be something wrong. And it's okay. We can fix it. And I always tell parents, especially parents of autistic children, who will come and tell me their child has a bit of autism. I say, don't worry. When I was at Harvard, one of my classmates was autistic. They do brilliant things, and it depends also on what level they are, but let's try to get the interventions in. And Minister, you want to talk about that area?
No, I was just saying that the focus for this year's Barry Wint Scholarship involves biomedical engineer, medical physics, speech therapy. Mm-hmm. So Barry Wint is also offering scholarships as a priority. Nursing and midwifery, occupational therapy, radiation therapy, and dental nurse therapy. So we are aligned in terms of the shortages of the skill sets, and we will finance persons who are interested and who apply, with the intention to come back, of course, or to practice.
Stay.
Thank you, ministers. We're going to be very patient and very open. I know it's after 10, but we're going to, I think there are some more questions on the floor.
All right.
All right.
Good morning again. Minister Tufton, just to follow up on, again, for Reuters, the Cuban doctor situation. Where are we now? Are we still taking in Cuban doctors on a regular basis? Is there any kind of interruption to any of those programs at all? Are we continuing to pay, let us say, directly to the Cuban personnel that come here? And just where is there any disruption? And the second question is, Minister, for you, is in terms of the quid pro quo, I don't want to call it that, but was there anything in that meeting with Rubio or even since then that the U.S. asked for in return in terms of Jamaican cooperation to, for instance, be able to get the lowered travel advisor, which they have delivered on? Have we signed up for anything to cooperate with them on? What was our guarantee or our commitment that we made?
The arrangement with the Cuban doctors is based on a MOU that is renewed periodically. And as it turns out, when the visit took place, we were in the midst of renegotiating those understandings. Some concerns were expressed, which we are all aware of, and we sought to allay those fears, in some instances through reassurances, but in other instances through some adjustments to the agreement that we have, which would have made some changes. Those changes have been made. There's still some conversations taking place, but I think we're in a much better place in terms of just reassuring our partners, the U.S. of course being the main partner, that we're complying with international rules as it relates to human trafficking and so on. So, sorry? So there are issues around passports and direct payments and so on, which we have made some adjustments in line with those issues. I don't have all the details, but I think those would have been two. How the program works is that the Cuban medical personnel, they come to Jamaica for a period of time, normally 3 years, and sometimes are renewed for an extra 2 years, so it could be up to 5. And they come in different batches. So there's always some going out and some coming in. And there are some due to come soon. And the recruitment, by the way, is done by Jamaicans. We actually send a team to Cuba and we do the interviews and select, because there are a number of issues that we need to satisfy ourselves with, including the language. So that back and forth is a continuous basis at different points in time. So there are some due to go now, or were due to go a few months back, and there are some that are due to come. So and that continues as of now.
All right. The question you asked about was whether or not there was any quid pro quo in relation to that meeting with not Senator anymore, but with Secretary Rubio. And we're an independent country, we're a sovereign nation, and I don't think we go into these things thinking quid pro quo. The travel advisory change we welcomed, and we're very happy for it, and we did discuss that in the meeting. And we did, again, as we had done in the past, pointed to the statistics in terms of what has been done with the JCF and how we're having a handle on crime. We also noted that it is very rare that you see crime against foreign nationals or tourists that are here. So we did note that in that meeting. But that was a part of other lobbying that has been happening by the government. And I have to also give a lot of credit to our diplomats, and especially Ambassador Marks, who was in the U.S. for a long time, who served under both Republican and Democratic administrations and did a fantastic job of representing Jamaicans. So when we had Secretary Rubio here, we were basically just continuing along the same lines we've been continuing with, talking to Congress members, and also we had worked with other persons in the U.S. to try to explain that Jamaica is a safe place for American tourists. And so we're very happy when we did see the advisory change. And I think Secretary Rubio also pointed out to the fact that Jamaica, he acknowledged the change that has happened in terms of crime. And he also pointed out to Jamaica's assistance in relation to transnational crime and how we've put that, shone that light on transnational crime. He also spoke to the partnership with Jamaica vis-a-vis Haiti, and also trying to have a more peaceful region. I think we're both aligned in relation to that outcome in terms of peace in the Caribbean region. And so I think if we look at it, there isn't any quid pro quo there. It is just really the travel advisory, and that very good news is really just the result of a lot of lobbying efforts. And also, we need to commend the security forces for what they have been able to do in relation to bringing crime down, because that was really the primary thing driving that travel advisory to Jamaica.
And so, Minister, maybe an interesting story for the international media to pursue is that element, that reduction, that precipitous fall
big
in
change.
Crimes and murders in Jamaica. Jamila.
And that's our last question. You saw me answer my phone. It was Minister Chuck calling me to say that there's a LegCom meeting of cabinet happening, and where am I? But I'm here with you.
So I'll load up the questions then.
All right.
All right, so my first question is to you, Minister. Educate Jamaica recently did a study about the top schools in Jamaica. And I wondered, to what extent does the government give credence to the report, given the Patterson report that in 2021 that talked about a holistic child and the social issues that goes into ensuring that when these children go to school based on the environment that they're coming from, the level of resources given to some of these schools, then they graduate or matriculate into a more wholesome person, not just focusing on academia. That's my first question for you. And to the Minister Tufton, rather, we had a job fair in January. However, I noticed that the same statistics for the critical nurses, it had the employment up until December. Weren't there any persons who were qualified or who applied for some of these positions, noted it, like, why was there a gap? Why did the numbers go up until December and not include January? Was the ministry not satisfied?
January of this year?
January of this year, which include the health fair. Was the ministry not satisfied with the quality of persons who applied to not include those in the shortage that we had? And I have a question from my friend Sashana Small at the Gleaner. She said that there is what is described as a shortage of beds at the Mandeville Regional Hospital. Can you give an update on how the ministry plans to address this?
Okay. You want me to answer, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I mean, we tend to do statistics in either financial year or calendar year. So I suspect what they did was to capture the data for the calendar year, which is why it may have ended in December. So I suspect that would be it. You know, either you go to March or you go to December. But I can say that my presentation does have some notes on the outcome of the interviews from the Expo. The Expo tried to achieve two things. They tried to expose the population to the career possibilities in health, and we put on display about 30 or so. A lot of people think it's just nurse and doctor, but it's so much more. Speech therapists, for example. And and we had a real nice turnout there. I think 10,000 people came, and then we interviewed, I think, nearly 2,000. The last count I have is that the system hired about 60 persons. Apparently, there was a lot of duplication. 100 person applying for one job, one particular post. I am not surprised, because what it's reflective of, so it may not move the needle in terms of December to January, as you have been asking. I'm not surprised, because it's reflective of the shortage of the scarce areas in the society, which we know because of the circumstances that I've identified. I think there are still some processing and interviewing and so on going on. Sometimes these things take a while, but my understanding is that they have hired 50 odd or 60 or somewhere in that region. Persons have been hired out of the interviews. Okay. The other issue about Mandeville Regional Hospital, I'd have to check. The system works in spurts. So depending on what the demand is and the season is, if it's a flu season, there's a respiratory issue, more people demand beds. If you have a major incident, so there are times when you have spare capacity, there are times when you have overflow. What they should do, though, is to work with other institutions to redirect the overflow to the extent that they can. So, for example, up in the hills of Manchester, Spalding, Percy Junior Hospital, I mean, they work closely with Mandeville Hospital. Maypen is always crowded, so Maypen would be a challenge. But depending on referrals too, they could go as far as Kingston. So I'd have to check, but it depends on the time, particular time.
Okay. All right. The question I got was on ranking and ranking of schools, and I thank you for that question, and I know there are some parents who like it. I was on the Education Transformation Commission with Professor Patterson, and we developed a value-added approach. And I think I much prefer the value-added approach. There are those who like to see those rankings, and I think there's some schools who love to see those rankings. But we believe very strongly that the education of the whole person is critical. So there are other elements apart from academics that are critical. So sports, what we do in the creative industries, those are just as important as academics. And so for us, what we think of as a good school, a great school, is one that can take a student at whatever level they come in and elevate them to a student who can thrive when they leave the school. And I have seen so many schools where they are doing just that, and they don't get the credit. They may not have the CXC passes, but they took students in who were from communities that had a lot of violence. These were children that were afflicted by trauma brains. Their brains were wired differently because of trauma. They often were not wired to really learn. They're extremely sensitive to noises in the classroom or to someone saying something to them. These are children that needed a lot of support. And I have seen these schools put in programs to work with them. I have seen students who are doing welding at school, and they're getting paid, and the Ministry of Education is buying the furniture that they have made and selling, and not selling it, but deploying it across all of our schools, but they get paid for that. I have seen schools where students are leaving with their TVET certification. They can go and start a business almost immediately. They don't feature in the rankings. But guess what? They're doing critical work for Jamaica because they're taking children who may have been lost and turning them into productive citizens. And so I see those rankings, and it's interesting. It's of academic interest to me to see how, those top ranked schools are doing. But for me, in terms of where I spend a lot of my headspace with the ministry, is looking at those children who are from circumstances that don't necessarily make them the best academically, but they have a lot of potential in them. And our role is to try to unleash all of that potential. And that's why at the Prime Minister Youth Awards, we had added the 2 new categories. We added special needs, and the chair of the selection committee is here, Fabian Brown. And we also added a TVET category because we have young people who are doing fantastic things in many areas, not just the academic sphere. And we have to say to them, there's a space for all of you. And what you're doing, even though it may not be the 12 CXCs, not sure why we now do 12 CXCs, but it's not the 12 CXCs. But guess what? You have something that is special and that Jamaica can use. And so, I welcome that, but I also welcome more value-added type rankings for our children. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Minister Tufton. You see, they really liked having you here. I'm very glad to have had you here. And, he said a lot of things, and we're very happy to have you as minister, and we look forward to all of the things that you have said we're going to be seeing in our health system. And the good thing is when you say it's going to happen, it does happen. And so I thank you. And I remind everybody, the Barry Wynn scholarships on Sunday, you're going to see it in the newspaper, $500 million for important areas that we need in our health sector. And so thank you, Minister Tufton. And I say thank you to everybody who's been here. Thank you to the media. Thank you for your questions. Even when they were hard, we appreciate the questions. And we look forward to our next post-cabinet press briefing. And we remind everyone we are at the start of the hurricane season. We have to be more vigilant. We're doing our best in the administration. We've already deployed resources across the island. We have food being deployed now, just in case there is anything. But we're going to continue to pray for God to guide us and for God to protect this beautiful country as He always has. But while we pray, we prepare. And so until I see you next time, I say God bless. Oh, yes, the fathers. That's an important thing. Sunday is Father's Day, and there are a number of good fathers in our country. And we want to support all those fathers and encourage them. I see someone shaking their head, but they're good fathers in Jamaica. We have some that aren't as good, and we're going to work with them. But for all the fathers who are involved in their children's lives, we thank you and we salute you, and we want to see more of that in our country. And we cannot reach to the heights we want to reach without our men taking their rightful position beside our women. And so it is a two-way street. And so on Father's Day, I say to all the fathers who are watching, happy Father's Day to you, and hopefully your children will treat you very well on Father's Day. And so as we end, we say God bless Jamaica, land we love, and we say thank you for continuing to choose Jamaica.